Hi there, Randi Green here. It is April 27th, 2023, and I'm going to share some thoughts that are founded in some of the events that have happened this week. We have had some huge solar bursts, and I can't remember what science calls them. They are, to the best of my knowledge, I could be wrong, but to the best of my knowledge, when I look at it, it appears as if they're inventing new concepts as we move along, as in within the idea that this has always been here, but now we are so much better at measuring it, and now we have so much better understanding. So now we can begin to differentiate the coronal mass ejections and call them solar bursts and solar storms and whatever they're calling them. But point being is this week, week 17 in 2023, between, I think it was April 1st, actually, it hit our Earth. We had a huge CME that was like a halo. It was around the entire sun. It came from it looked as if it came from the core and blasted outwards. Science says it comes from a specific place of the sun, but where is, when we talk in terms of where's center, where's up, east, west, what have we, when we know that things are moving around and space is not stationary as we know of it. So thereby it came from somewhere on the sun and it blasted outwards and it enveloped the entire sun. I saw the video of it. Similar or dissimilar to solar burst or CMEs that comes from one spot and then goes out like kind of what we call a jet, or similar as if you have a volcanic eruption, it just goes up in the air and out and then are pushed into space. But here it was around enveloping the entire sun. And that was a huge burst that came there like a full explosion around the sun, and it hit our magnetic field, giving northern lights or auroras all the way down to, I think they could see it even in Greece or other places where people normally don't see northern lights. And they were in the full range between pink and green and red and purple and blue and what have you. Amazing pictures, very strong. I didn't see it where I live though, but it could be because I wasn't looking at the right time. So what are the effects of this? And we have talked about the shutting down of the shields of the sun in the new reality challenges from the sun course material that you find on the randigreen.one website, where that is more suitable because that is where we move forward. We're here in the Food, Health and Environment project. We are kind of summing up the changemaker material, and then the next step for the whole academy will be to cover the 2025 timeline. There will more focus on the new reality challenges from the gates and the reality network itself and the racial grids and what we're going to experience there, the fifth cycle sciences. So that's a little bit different. Whereas the randigreen.one, the higher order density 1 work institute, although it's going to be aimed mostly for practitioners, and that means healers and mentors and mediators that are working with the energies of a reality field in different ways. I will explain that in the educations, as well as some of the density 1 work that we are to do as individuals. There will be courses there as well. But the foundation of the challenges of what we're experiencing with the changes in our world and reality field is best covered here in the Food, Health and Environment project for 2023. And then it will just go from there, because technically this is something that has been put in motion and is not going to change. So this is an escalation and what we call a ramping up and amping up. I'm calling it both because amping energetically and ramping is kind of building. So it's building up, but energetically and also in terms of our reality field. So what are the effects of this huge solar burst? Because I will call it a burst, or the complete enveloping CME. And this is, I know what I want to say. I'm just trying to find the right words, because what is happening technologically speaking is that it hits our magnetic field, and then our magnetic field begins to ring. But we are also, for instance, in Denmark, we have an extremely low ozone layer compared to what it normally is. And that means that there are holes into the cosmic radiation fields, or the cosmic radiation fields that are out there. So they're also coming in cosmic radiation. But this time the cosmic radiation is not from the dark galactic core. It's actually from the parallel future Andromedan system, not the parallel universal matrix. They are only in the 4th dimension, but these are from the 7th, 8th, and 9th dimension. So that's the density 3 layer of the original worlds, or parallel worlds that were part of the LPU, but have now changed more and more into what we call the original progressive dynamics and mechanics that were part of the original worlds. And I'm deliberately not calling it the holographic metaverse, because that has been taken by Facebook founder and Meta, and are used there. The metaverse is there used for their explanation. So in that way, they have kind of drained the word and emptied it out. So anyways, it doesn't matter. It was just a constructed word, because in these realities, we don't use language as we have it here, and nobody talks about it as, oh, this is what we call this or whatever. Even what we have called our solar system and universe and galaxies and what have you are made of words by us. So it fits our culture, our language, and our mindset. So language, culture, and mindset are tied together. Thereby, we can't say it's the same word for all races, same words for all realities, or same words for all futures and pasts and what have you, which makes words and the spoken language meaningless when we talk about the original worlds, the density races, and everything that exists beyond the enclosure. Just to get that one in check. So it doesn't really matter. It's just for us so we can orient ourselves. What are we talking about here? So we create concepts so we are in agreement. Once you get telepathic, it's so simple. You think about it and then the other one can see it. So it's a mind-to-mind conversation without words, using imagery and using code systems and using information systems, which is 10 times more accurate and 10 times more, what we could say, in concord with your original ways of transferring information. Now you would say, well, if you're doing the telepathic, let's you go down that route for a little while. If we're talking about telepathic and I'm showing you something, I can of course only show you what I know of until I'm able to link up to the holographic teaching system. And then I tap into the level that I'm investigating and working with. And then from there, I build a bridge from me to the holographic teaching system, the library, and to you, and you can choose to look into the same level, and then we can investigate it together. That's triangulation and not just me. That's kind of what we call the horizontal transfer. But here we also do a vertical horizontal transfer and want to create a triangulation that then connects the information I have with the library, connects the information you have with the library, and then we get corrected what we are interpreting the wrong way, so we get the correct information in our little triangulation. So that's how we use the Trinity dynamics once we get to the higher perception levels, as we talked about in the transition science courses, the psyche as energy, the psyche as processes, and keeping the psychic energetic balance. That's course 3, where we work with trinities. So first we work linearly, then we work opposition, and then we work in trinities. Remember that, because that's what we are dealing with here as well when we talk about the earth, ourselves, and what's coming from the sun. That's a trinity. So we're having 3 fields that are here interacting together in a trinity. So that's why I was a little bit, okay, how does this work? So we have the sun that affects our magnetic field, and our magnetic field affects the reality grids, the holographic network on our planet, including the inserted alien holographic networks, the A-pins that are also there, the alien pylon information network, as the Quantics call them. Pylon means pillar, and that's the crystal pillars that they have put in their crystal pillars, taking over, hijacking the original old world order technology, adapting that by inserting crafts into the holographic network, And these crafts then emit the codes up to the pylon network, which then emits that code sequence that allows for the racers to operate here. So that's how that one works. And that's not Klontic. That's how I see it. Klontics do not talk about the crafts in the holographic network. They just say, well, the Dracos put in their A pin, the scavengers put in their A pin, the Aldebarans put in, or whatever, the dove, the dragon, the lion, the snake, whatever, these different groups that have put in their A pins. And that's mainly and mostly run by crafts that are put into the fourth dimension, into the holographic network, from where they continuously ping between the craft technology, and the pylon network. The pillar project is based upon the same crystal pillars. I just we could have called it the pylon project, but that would be inaccurate. So again, the reason why they call it the pylon goes with some of the old Greek understanding of two pillars that are in front of the temple that creates a gateway. So they have, as we know, the Klontics that took a lot of old words and changed them. Instead of calling it, for instance, the path of the adepts, they call it the Adasha path, and onward and so forth. Instead of calling it the Christus, they call it the Christ, and onward and so forth, for reasons and purposes that only the Syrian bees know of, creating their own language, similarly as I did in the Souls of Humanity. But this is to take it out of the collective and create something else that creates a new thought form, and by that a new communication system. Again, all made up for the purpose of creating joint fields of understanding and joint fields of codes and joint fields of interpretation of reality. So when we have this triangulation between what we could call the sun and our planet and ourselves, that means that as the sun is shedding off its shields. And that's the first step where I want to go, because these shields are technically they are connected to the dark sun. And this is where it gets so complicated, because behind our sun, there's a dark sun. And that dark sun is part of dark light technology. And that dark light technology were connected to our sun in 2007, which is why it began to collapse its shield of the original density 2 technologies that were inserted by the regressed races to create the enclosure in the artificial solar system we are part of. So that began collapsing in 2007. 15 rings of the original higher density type of energy, density 2 energy, that were connected to the original pillar project, re-engineered by the hijackers to match their pylon project and A-pins. Since the dark galactic core were beginning to link up via dark light technology, created the dark sun in the alternate universal structure that is behind ours as part of the inverted third cycle races. They created a bridge connected to the core of the sun, and by that were able to insert their dark light technology there. That then jumped to what we could call the moon, it jumped to our planet, it jumped to Mars, it jumped to the other planets, and infusing the whole solar system with dark light technology. From that, they expanded out from the 8th dimension to the galactic core, where they originally had created connection to the dark galactic core and the black hole systems, and onward and so forth. The blast in 2017 between two major old dark or black holes then create a ripple effect, amplifying and activating the dark light technology in the cores of the planets in our solar system, and by that infused all the rings around the sun with this what we call dark light infusions that were now not only in the rings around the sun, but also that's the shields, but also the orbits that where each one of the planets were positioned. This is complicated and you don't need to understand this, just saying there is a mechanics to this, why this has happened. That is why the dark ones could take over reality field from 2018 to 2022, and we had the experience of that amping up and ramping up old grids, racial grids, shenanigans, which we experienced the last 5 years here. I'm deliberately not mentioning it by name, so make sure that this video will not be taken down. We never know when something is allowed to be said and when something is not allowed to be said. And for those of you in the future, you will see that this is, we could say it's a coronal mass ejection that happened from the dark light technology that affected the magnetic field, and by that stirred up old forms of viruses and diseases that were part of the racial grids, which we had with the Black Plague in the Middle Ages. Same signature, same structure as the Spanish flu and onward and so forth. So that's been activated a couple of times, and that's what happened there the last 5 years. So because of all of these things, the dark light technology, the shields of the sun began to break down, and that led to the Colontics did the EVAC, called out in 2007. And we have had the progressive races did it in 2020 when the councils pulled out the library and then set in motion, said, now we are also in EVAC mode because there's nothing here that we can do. All of the original technologies are now breaking down due to the dark light technology and the fusions from the dark shields of the sun that is now collapsing. Because of dark light technology, the original or the density 2 level of the sun has collapsed, and that's why we now have a density 1 sun, which means we are now positioned in complete density 1 outer domain reality that is part of the devastation cycles. So in a way, we could say, well, the dark ones arranged to create a reality field where they were able to, again, to connect to humans via the racial grids, coming up into humans, affecting humans closely. I remember seeing things from these, the third cycle already as a child, but it grew exponentially. The last 5 years has been a bit of a nightmare, to put it mildly, and in that allowed them to enter into a reality field in herds and clusters that had not been seen before, except from the Spanish flu and when we had the plague and onward and so forth, because some of these greater things that happens in our reality field that causes effects in human biomes and in human cellular structures are tied to the dark forces or the 2-8 pillar races that are part of what we call the underworld. And these are shells and ghosts and what have you, miasms, as it was called in the old days. So with that understanding, we now also understand that how science view health and diseases are something completely else than what science thinks. They call it virus and bacteria. I say, yes, it is virus and yes, it is bacteria, but these are little entities that has an attachment to something else, as we're seeing in the microbiota in our gut that are connected to artificial fourth dimensional clone systems as well as energetic parasites. So we are getting that understanding now, saying, okay, we're not returning to Middle Age understanding of things, but we definitely see the interconnectedness. And we also had, before the plague, we had shift in weather, we had cold weather, we had volcanic eruptions, we had cloudings that came from the ashes of the volcanic eruptions that created a cover over entire Europe, and that led to famine. And after that, we had the plague, which is why some of the things, some thought at the time that was the end of the world. That was the last time we got drawn into the devastation cycle. So there are dynamics that follows when the third cycle races get their dark light technology up and running. So they infuse the apins, they infuse the shields of the sun, they infuse the magnetic field around our planet, and by that are affecting humans because we are functioning in between the energies of the sun, the magnetic field, and the racial grids on our planet. And these are some of the things we're going to deal with once the 2-8 pillar begin to activate in 2025. Okay. So what we are having with that huge CMEs I also talked about in this, the new reality challenges from the sun, as these shields break down. And not only break down, the original ones broke down first, and now we're beginning to get the emissions of the dark light technology. And the one we had on the 21st of April, that was the 8th ring. So now it's kind of, and then we go to the 7, 6, 5, 4, and 1. They're going from outside and they go from 15 into 1, whereas similarly as the sun shedded off its original density 2 rings, and that ended in 2022. So the original energy is gone, but now the dark light or the dark shields are collapsing as well because of the parallel Andromedan system from the future that are linked up to white holes, we can call it that, the white core of the galaxies, and are now pumping density 1 positive energy into our system, and by that are beginning to collapse the dark light technology. So we're having that collapse as well, and as that happens, a lot of what's left of the ones that try to get into a reality field from 2018. They actually began in 2007, but trying to get into a reality field means that some of the ones that are choosing either to get into human form or choosing to leave our system. And that's the shenanigans that are going on right now. With that dark light technology, it goes with what we call the gamma ray radiation belt, and the gamma ray is also what we call purple energy, and that's all sometimes connected to what we see when we work with different forms of energies that are connected to the dark ones. We call it magic. It often appears as purple energy, but that is technically dark energy infusions that we then transform using purple, bright blue, sky blue, golden, white, and then see it dustify when we have these symbols and we have these energies in our fields. So with that understanding, right now as well as in the future, all depending on how long it will take for these rings to collapse, there will be, every time one of these rings collapse, there will be a specific infusion of radiation into plants in our reality field. And that means that we, in our energy work, are to look at when we have had a CME like that one. It's good to look up, if you can't feel it, I could feel it, you get distorted, you get confused, then you know something's up. And then it's a good idea to check out the different systems that are reporting the CMEs, because I don't think that's made up. There is, for me, whenever I experience this kind of thing, there is a correlation between what they are reporting and what I am feeling. Not that I can say, oh, it's a CME, but if I pay better attention, I actually probably be better to understand what it is, because I feel the ringing, I feel the dizziness, I feel that something is changing. And I feel it in the activity of the entities, the different ones that comes up and are trying to get what they need to get. And the dark ones are always the top of the pyramid. Remember that one. So you have first, and I had that as well, energetic parasites, and androids, insectoids, and then we go into the scavengers, and then at the top, there are the dark ones. So that's the pillar, that's the pylon that they are working with in these different towers or pillars of energy or pylons of energy connecting to whatever apin that they have created, and by that create the pattern from which they can operate inside a reality, linking up to energy systems that are connected to these apins, that have clones in the artificial force that are part of these different operating schemes within these apins and within the networks of the different groups that are operating here. Some of them came in as humanoids, functional, and have turned into dark ones, but they're still connected to their apin and their holographic network and their crafts and whatever they put in stasis and left the physical form behind, and then became energetic beings, and from there kind of lost control of whoever or whatever, which is why they now need to possess other people. Back to the whole kind of food that we're talking about here as I'm completing this course material. That means that whenever we have had these CMEs of the sun, it affects the magnetic field. And once it affects the magnetic field, it affects the plants and all life forms on a planet. So that influences the food that we're eating. It's a good idea to look at green leaves, for instance. Right now I can see they have this kind of ring of a purple tone, which means they need to be cleared through purple, blue, golden, white, get rid of the dark light, and then recalibrated it into what we call a nutritional holographic setting that matches our energy system. But you're also to be observant of your own energy system and what has been infused by the dark light and the purple color, and what can be ignited from that when these things happen, because it affects the magnetic field, so it affects our energy system as well, including our biological level. So that also means during nighttime when this happens, there are different rise-ups, because as the sun ignites or sheds off or casts off this enormous amount of energy, it gets caught by the magnetic field. We see the auroras on the sky, but it ripples all the way through the magnetic field, because the magnetic field is a toroidal technology that goes into the core of our planet, around the planet in circular movements. It's technically the flower of life, goes in, affects all the apins, affects every network, affects everything. So if there is a burst of dark light technology, of course, it affects the dark grids, and by that amplifies that, and by that activates activity in the realms of the human perception field. And the dark ones are mostly visible for those who have ignited their mind field, because that's the 3-5 configuration. Whereas people that have only ignited their 2-4 configuration, that's what we call the emotional field, connect to the biofield, they will only experience the astral shenanigans of it. They will see a heightened level of astral energy. And that one, the astral level, goes with the loving kindness clearing work, whereas the mental processes go in the vertical, using frequency spectrum to clear this out of the neural network. Sorry about that, and then lift it up to its co-systems. Another good way to see how this is affecting our reality is to look at animals, is also to look at the insects that are in your room. If there are dark light technology amplification, you will typically have more spiders and other little critters that are surfacing due to the calling out of that energy. So this is where we can see everything is interconnected. So we both have the effect on what we eat, we have the effect on the environment, we have the effect on our biological level, and we have the effect of our energy system. This is important to understand when we continue to work with our health, that once these different CMEs, because there's going to be more, once the sun goes to its density 1 status, it will begin a different type of collapsing processes that will take around 34 years, sorry about that. And then it will become a cold sun, and then it will shed no energy off, but then nothing will technically be able to live on our planet as this gets worse. But this is into the future, and that's why the deadline is 2065, as it always has been. That's where the nuclear cycle activation and cleanup processes are done, and then everything that belonged to the original progressive worlds have been pulled out and shut down, and that means the Pillar Project, that is the foundation of our solar system. And then it will just become a solar system that is completely similar to all of the dead zones that we're seeing around in other systems when science are looking out, say there is no life out there. Yes, because everything is a dead zone. All this is one of the remaining little hubs that are left in this quadrant, and everything else has been evacuated and everything has been left behind and has gone into this devastation cycle. And that's where we could say the frequency sciences and general science and what their understanding of dynamics and mechanics, where everything goes into chaos and entropy over a longer period of time, will begin to kick in. They will, that's the most, unless they insert alien technology. But if things goes the natural way, we will have the heating first, which we're having now, as things just shed off. That creates more kinetic processes. Once everything is shed off and the sun no longer is what we call a plasma coil system, which is an orb as it is now, and stops having this kinetic processes of burning off and transforming helium into hydrogen, well, then it will become what we call a cold sun, and that's where it goes into its neutron field. There is no longer electrons and protons that are acting together. So with that, first it sheds off the electrons. That's why with the shields that we are, and then into the dark light, the polarity of it, then it will shed off its protons. That's the helium to hydrogen processes that will then also stop at some point. That's why the regress races will be hit by that one. And then we will go into what we call the neutron field, and that's the android transhuman worlds. So this is how it goes with reality fields, and that's the devastation cycles in a nutshell. So with that little short update on that one and some of these dynamics, the question is then, what do we do? Right now, we do what we need to do to keep our energy system functional. That's the first big important step. And that's where we learn to take our energy work in stages, not beginning to go into panic about, oh yeah, everything's shutting down. That's a fact. So how do we deal with the facts that this is shutting down? We are observant of the coronal mass ejections, the solar bursts, and what have you, the sensations in our body, the sensation in our central nervous system, the sensations in our peripheral nervous system, as well as what do we see of entities. Are we having a heightening of astral entities? Well, then that's something that's hitting what we call the Schumann resonance, and by that are affecting our emotional field. Is there what we call auroras that are in the northern light that are higher up in the atmosphere? Well, then it's affecting the frequency fence as well as our mind field. Is it closer to Earth, as in kind of volcanic eruptions, tectonic plate shifts, anything else that goes with the closer the frequency dynamics of the electromagnetic field that are closely connected to the biological level? Well, then that will amplify our collective morphogenetic fields of behind the human genome. And that also goes with events in our reality field and onward and so forth. These things will have a greater impact compared to what they used to have. And that's because most of the shield technology that the Dracos took over, the colonizing races took over, they adapted it into prohibiting technologies that created the emotional field. That emotional field is insertion to block our vibrational field. And by that, we were not sensing to the same degree because we were all so absorbed in our own mind processes, in our own ways of thinking about things, in me, myself, and I, and why is it so important for me to get this or that or whatever, our own thought processes, our own ideas of what we have perceived and onward and so forth. Our own little isolated psychodrama of effects, cause and effects that we technically have engineered ourselves by the way we think and the way we feel and the way we perceive reality, until we change that through mindfulness, contemplation, meditation, clearing work, and energy work, especially working with love and kindness, which is what the different teachings have taught us, that if we work with our heart field and clean out the sense of self, the sense of I, the sense of this is so important for me because I'm the most important person in the whole universe, and begin to understand, no, I'm just a little piece in a huge puzzle. I'm a drop of water in the sea of other humans. We are all interacting, interconnected. And by that, we're having a huge effect on our surroundings. We're adding to the collective fields of distortion. We're adding to the fields of collective thought forms that push this reality closer to the dark ones or further away from them. The way we think, the way we feel attracts energies, links us up with different forms of the networks, the APIs, the inserted technology, the prohibiting technology, whatever you want to call it. And by that are actively pushing us into the distortion fields from where we feed these negative agendas. So our first step is, as I talked about in Future Human Project courses as well, into transformative energy work, and everything that we're doing, we need to get ourselves under control first. So that's step one in all of this, so that we clear out the emotional field and then disconnect from the astral levels and the Schumann resonance, and in that get to our own vibrational field, so we are in charge of our heart field. But once we get there, we will be affected more strongly. But what is ringing in the vibrational field, that is the created magnetic field that is connected to the Schumann resonance. We will perceive more accurately what is actually going on there. And that's where loving kindness comes in, golden energy. Just be kind to whatever comes into your field, give it golden energy and see it disperse and cease to exist. The processes are different when we talk about the mind processes and the entities of the dark realms, because they don't respond well to loving kindness. On the contrary, actually feeds them. So that's where we use the purple, the blue, the golden, the white, dismantle the codes, whatever link up they have, get rid of the energetic parasites, and see how they turn into dust, and then transmute them as far as we can for the time being, until we learn to do timeline work that's connected to vibrational field, get rid of the energies and the regress genetics that links us up to the programs that are controlled by the dark ones. So we need to go through the advanced energy work in the alien inserted technology to be able to really get rid of all of these levels. However, there is a backside to all of this. Once we've been in contact with some of these energies, unfortunately, the code systems are then integrated and copied, replicated into our energy system, which is part of the sixth layer of our psychic energetic processes, unfortunately. So for those of you who have the fifth and the sixth layered activation, that you were part of the Pillar Project, you will typically be hit harder than those of you who only reached the third pillar, for instance. You didn't get up to the higher levels of the 410 under the Dracos or the 511 under the Dark Vega Niburian races, or the 612 pillar that were completely demolished when the hijackers took over. So those of us who were in the 612, we are typically tied into some of the mammal folding systems that are part of the 2.8 configuration, and some of the complete takeover and demolishing that they did to the 612 pillar to cut us off from the holographic metaverse or the original progressive worlds. So we'll be hit harder, hence why is one of the reasons why I'm always hit on all levels, on all pillars, with whatever critters that are within each pillar of 1 to 7, that's dimension 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 in pillar 1, 7, and 2 to 8 dimension in pillar 2, 8, 3 to 9 dimension in pillar 3, 9, 4 to 10 dimension, and onward and so forth. So I'm hit on both the outer domain, the middle domain, the inner domain, and the core domain. Hence my constant work that I'm always on. So with that understanding, it is also a challenge to just exist in that this is the new reality. And this is the future for all of us, learning to look at food not just as food, learning to look at our health not just as our health that are connected to our own psychosomatic, emotional, biofield processes, but are also affected by the changes in the sun, the changes in our reality field, and the changes in other people and what they are doing, as well as the understanding that whatever comes from the galaxies will now also affect us. Either the struggle from the dark galactic core to get rid of that one, the purple dark shield, dark light collaboration and technologies, or aligning ourselves with the white galaxies and the future galaxies that are trying to create bridges for those of us that need to get out and are in the position of actually working with these, what we call white galaxy, white core galaxy dynamics and code systems. Of course, the dark galaxies and the dark races and the inverted third cycle races will do whatever they can to play the polarity card on that one. So that's part of the fifth cycle progression dynamics, understanding the dynamics and mechanics of polarity and how that affects our mind field in different ways. And if our mind field can be turned dark, well, then it shuts down our heart field. And then it affects our biofield, and then we connect to the dark grids and onward and so forth. So this is the yo-yo up and down that we constantly are in, those of us who are doing the expanded version of the Food, Health, and Environment project. So it all comes down to energy work. And it all comes down to the ability to observe energy work, and it all comes down to our ability to work within the concepts of energy work. And in that concept of energy work, not just our own local field, but also the planetary fields, as well as the solar fields, as well as the galactic fields. These are what we call the domains. Okay, so in that, would you say, well, that's not an easy solution, Randi? No, this is a process. This is a process of mastering energy and consciousness. And that's the path of the adept, or the Adashi path, to really master the outer domain with all that entails, including being part of the devastation cycles where everything goes into chaos and entropy. It's dustifying around us. And again, people say, well, then we'll just leave it for that natural process and everything will be good and fine. And as I see it, those of you who have viable genetics, you will not be allowed to go into the devastation cycle. The holographic teaching system, the original LPU genetics, the original technologies behind your template will try to activate you as part of the new grand cycle activation and cleanup process. So you don't have a choice. If you're viable genetics, you should be activating by now. You should be experiencing a lot of stuff that needs to be cleaned out, that activates and are in your face on an everyday basis. So you can say, well, I'm not having anything. Well, there are two options there. Either you're so distorted that you can't feel the activation processes, and then they will hit you at some point. Or as it goes with the new grand cycle activation and cleanup processes, use it or lose it. It will activate, and if you don't get the window of opportunity, you will lose the probability of it, because then it will begin to go into deterioration naturally on its own. That is why the councils pulled out the upper levels of the library, because by doing that, then the signal was to the entire LPU project, pillar project technology. We are now shutting this project down and have begun the long extraction process. The call outs were given, they are part of the whole template science course 4. The call-outs were given in 2021. So this is it. Yes. So With that one said, I know this is not particularly good news, but this is part of the food health and environment. This is part of the food that will change its calibration, frequency calibration. We should be observant of that. What we had, sometimes we could put in the fridge, it will not be hit to the same degree. We can put food, I have put food in different types of containers as well to avoid critters and other stuff from growing from it, because the different configurations that will come from the sun will activate different levels of what we have both in plants as well as in our DNA, activating older code systems, which leads to older forms of bacteria and older forms of viruses and older forms of microbiota. So that's part of it, part of our observance as well. And when we do pull things out from the fridge or from the cupboards, we look at it energetically and transform it into what we need to transform it into. I talked about that both in the whole advanced class 3 you can get for free, as well as in the transformative energy system, the work with nutrition. And then we are also to be observant of our own bodily energies so that we have the ability to calibrate the food, recalibrate the food, because our configuration is accurate, and the configuration should go from density 2 under the hijackers, artificial, regressed, lower field configuration that keeps us inside the enclosure, into the original outer domain, density 1 configuration that allows us to do the return path dynamics. And the first step to that is the loving kindness. The first step to that is to regain our ability to work with energy correctly, to transform the energies of the heart field and to transmute the energies of the mind field, and by that begin to build the bridge to the original outer domain holographic teaching system, the original outer domain pylon grids or pillar grids of the racial type that we were originally connected to, connect to whatever is left of the original pillar project, LPU project, from where we can begin to restore our genetics. There are solutions, but the amount of work it takes every day, the minimum requirement of energy work is 3 hours per day, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour midday, 1 hour in the evening, and often more. The requirement is also to be able to wake up at night when we are having shenanigans going on and then stop it and clear ourselves, so we won't just be in our sleep being dragged around and put into different projects where we don't belong, which will then affect our energy system throughout the day. If we can't clear it out during nighttime, then we must clear it out in the morning before we begin our day. And the signs are typically being tired, feeling full of residuals, feeling negative thoughts, not being particularly yoo-hoo, but feeling as someone hit us with a baseball bat. And have drained us, or we're tired, and not making up excuses of, oh, it's just because I was too active yesterday. No, this is something has come into your nighttime and taking your surplus of energy. And how do you get yourself back on track? So these are some of the things that are important when we do this work. And with that one, I will end this podcast and continue into the next one. Thank you.